I want you to take this in.
That's the myth in America is an educated athlete. I don't believe anybody in America who's in business wants athletes to be educated if they intend on doing business with that athlete. And the minute that athlete becomes educated, they're somewhat offended by it. Because now an educated athlete doesn't just say, yes, our boss, and sit there. He starts to question the system. And so now when you get guys like Patrick and Alonzo and Dikembe, and I was very proud because every time they got out of the car, the Georgetown guys were jumping up. But we had been arguing and fussing all the time about everything. I didn't always agree with every position that they took, even as it related to the lockout. But I was proud of the fact that now they're using their intelligence. Well, we talk a lot about athletes being educated. But the educated athlete, you're going to have problems. You're going to have lockouts, you're going to have boycotts, and people don't want that to happen.
That is John Thompson, the late basketball coach who recruited and mentored Allen Iverson at Georgetown, won a title in '84 with Patrick Ewing at the school, and even lifted 2 championship trophies as a player with the Boston Celtics. He was also highly doubted in his life. Teachers called him the R word, labeled him uneducable. He later learned it was because of poor eyesight. A classmate of his, John Mudd, would say of Thompson, John was in the forefront of integration. He was one of the few black students in a white school. He would go on to win 596 games at Georgetown, by far the most in program history.
I think that the sports industry in and of itself has a great deal of responsibility for the degree to which sports, in fact, has not brought people together in this society, because they haven't told the truth that would tend to undermine some of the established, institutionalized racism, discrimination, prejudice that exists between people in a society.
That man speaking is sports sociologist Dr. Harry Edwards, a man who would help organize Tommy Smith and John Carlos's historic protest on the medal stand at the '68 Mexico City Games. For years, the FBI tailed him. He was denied tenure at the University of California, and for his work, J. Edgar Hoover put him on a list. It would last from 1971 to 1978. Edwards, like others on said list, were deemed dangerous to the state. Edwards had been labeled anti-American and more a revolutionary.
You're a man who makes $90,000 a year, which isn't exactly slave wages. What's your retort to that?
A well-paid slave is nonetheless a slave.
Curt Flood, a man who was blackballed from Major League Baseball and deemed an outcast because he fought for something all athletes enjoy today: free agency. He, like many other athletes who fought for themselves and the rights of players, had his intellect questioned by the press. On the topic of athletes,
they are, in a sense, people set apart from the time they were 7, 8 years old, when everybody realized they had athletic prowess. They're treated like a beautiful girl. Nobody really cares what they think. It's like you gradually become a product and not a person.
Bill Russell knew it and felt it.
I said, "This is a restaurant, isn't it? I'd like to get something to eat." He told me no, so I walked out.
He was a man of conviction, unafraid. He spoke out against all things, great and small, that bothered him, wrote Sports Illustrated. He wouldn't even show up at the Hall of Fame when he was inducted because he had concluded it was a racist institution.
What most people fail to realize is, and I get this question all the time, being the only black in tennis right now, they say, you know, tennis has really been good to you. And I'd like to compare this with team sports, which are in effect nothing but small corporations. They're still run for their stockholders.
And the great Arthur Ashe, a civil rights icon who was the first black man to win major tennis championships, including the U.S. Open, Australian Open, and Wimbledon. He broke barriers in a predominantly white sport. He was even arrested when protesting apartheid South Africa, shout out to the Musks, and a United States policy that sends Haitian refugees back to their homeland at the time. Sadly, that still rings true today.
I think if this present generation doesn't stand up and even more that when their kids are growing up and playing, they'll have the same kind of problem. So it behooves these kids to stand up and do everything they possibly can.
Jackie Robinson needs no introduction. While the times may have changed, many who serve as the mouthpieces in media, specifically sports media, simply have not evolved. They have just found a way to fine-tune the language.
They obviously wanted Jaylen Brown out of the building. Jaylen Brown, I had 2 NBA sources tonight, 2 people in the league, one an executive, one a scout, say that Jaylen Brown it's a disease. He suddenly thinks he's the smartest guy in every room he's in.
And now we see a racially coded narrative surrounding former Boston Celtics star and current member of the Philadelphia 76ers, Jaylen Brown.
But I wasn't wrong. Nor was I wrong with what I said a couple of years ago. When he wore them shirts talking about state your source, because I said, yo, he's not liked.
And it's truly, truly a shame that so many are piling on. Add ESPN's Bobby Marks to the mix. Very quickly, if you can, become a paid channel member or go to Buy Me a Coffee to support this channel. Thank you. Who would say on Sirius XM? There's mixed feelings about Jaylen Brown when you talk to teams. The analytics of Brown is not good. I had one, not an executive, but an analytics guy say, yeah, we view him as the 7th best player on a team. I was like, holy crap. What are we doing? Now, Jaylen Brown is not one to stay silent, and he would clap back. Nobody has won more combined regular season and playoff games since I entered the league 10 years ago. Ahmad K. Smith would write on Substack the following: reports surfaced suggesting that people viewed him as someone who believes he's the smartest person in the room, that his personality was difficult, that his independence rubbed people the wrong way. Think about that. The criticism wasn't about his jumper. It wasn't about his defense. It was about his intellect, his confidence, and his independence.
He suddenly thinks he's the smartest guy in every room.
It's far beyond dog whistle. It's outright racist. And it has been going on for years, not only in national media across the country, but in other markets and from other front offices. They've been saying this shit about Jaylen Brown. Because that's the real disease, is the way we talk about these black athletes. You thought Jaylen Brown was mercurial and difficult? Maybe what you saw was someone not pandering to your need for black athletes to speak to you in a very specific way. Somebody who was modeling themselves and who learned how to operate in their community and for their community from one of the great civil rights activists in the history of sports, Bill Russell. One of the great athletes of all time, one of the great civil rights activists, one of the great human beings. In fact, that is exactly how he described Bill Russell when he talked about him after his death. Jaylen Brown is everything you could possibly ask from an NBA superstar.
To be clear, if you are completely unaware of Jaylen Brown off the basketball court, you should know this. He gave a lecture at Harvard. He collaborated with MIT and served as the media lab director. And as a side note, when he signed the largest contract in NBA history, he was in a robotics session with the students at MIT. He speaks Spanish, was elected as the youngest vice president of the NBA Players Association, and he took some of the hardest courses in college at UC Berkeley. He was a star there, by the way. One teacher even said, Jaylen, you're a freshman. Freshmen do not enroll in this class. And yet he did. Because in his own words, yeah, I'm here for basketball, but I'm also here to get an education. He wanted to be tested. He wanted to push the limits, at least in the classroom and the basketball court. And he has excelled in both areas. As The Athletic put it, Brown was sending the message. He was not the typical athlete. Derek Van Reenen, a professor at UC Berkeley, would say, I think of Jaylen as a public scholar. From Smith once more via Substack. The goal was never just to make it into the room. The goal was always to walk into the room fully as yourself. Jaylen Brown reminds us that success doesn't always silence criticism. Sometimes it amplifies it. I go back to what John Thompson said, which is that they don't want an educated athlete. What they want is a dumbed-down athlete. Because when you have a dumbed-down athlete, what you have is an ability to go along with everything, an ability to go along with the treacherous business practices, the ability to go along with contracts that may demean them, may even lower their value, and also a media that goes along with the NBA, specifically as a league, but also with sports, the hierarchy of the billionaire class, and the way that they mistreat athletes. Jaylen Brown is someone that I think a lot of media people and a lot of basketball people are afraid of, because what he does through his activism, through his advocacy, and also the fact that they are saying, even when, and I remember this, he was coming out of UC Berkeley saying he's too smart. He competed too highly at chess. What they're saying is, we don't want someone like Jaylen Brown on our team, because what he might do is really peel back the curtain. What he might reveal is our inaccuracies in our approach, and also someone that won't play ball. I think they fear Jaylen Brown. And what I also think is really treacherous and damaging is the way that the media has gone about this. I am sick of hearing this, and I really think it's time for a change.